Well, welcome back, YouTube. I have something special for you guys again today. This is going to be a video showing you a trip that we took back, it was actually in 2020, to move my daughter from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania down to Austin, Texas. So I'm going to be reporting back on fuel economy, overall, how did the trip go, including DEF economy, which is something that was rather shocking over this 3,536 mile trip. So if you like this video, please make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're notified of new videos when they come out. And also give me a thumbs up, I really appreciate it. And now let's get into the data. So you'll see here the big white trailer. That's one of my newer trailers. You might have seen that in some of the other videos that I've done. I'm going to be doing a lot of towing with this trailer, comparing some things in the future, like how does speed affect the overall performance of the vehicle? How does a different profile of a different vehicle affect the economy and also the performance? And also, how does the weight actually of the trailer affect the overall performance of the vehicle and also the fuel economy? I actually did, for this long trip, I actually installed the Hensley Hitch. So I have the option of running the Hensley Hitch, or I can actually install a standard hitch and run this either way. A lot of it's going to depend on how much load you're actually planning on running, and also how far I'm actually going to be traveling while everything's hooked up. Here you can see an overview, courtesy of Google Maps, for the trip that I actually took. And here you see a photo of what the trailer actually looked like with the tail opened up. So we had the trailer almost as full as we could get it. There was a little tiny bit of space still left inside the trailer, but not much at all. And after we had it loaded up like this, we ended up stopping at a truck stop and did a weight scale ticket. So I'll show you that now. So as you can see, the front axle was within specification. The rear axle, we were actually over a tiny bit. Trailer axles had plenty of extra capacity on the trailer axles, and the overall gross weight was 14,000 pounds. The gross combined weight rating for the truck, the Silverado, is 15,000 pounds, so we had actually 1,000 extra mobile. So after we saw this, we made some adjustments and took some of the weight out of the bed of the pickup truck, stuffed it back into the rear of the trailer, and was able to make sure that driving from Harrisburg down to Austin, that we were within all of the allowable limits for this setup. So I'm actually going to step back a tiny bit. On day one, we actually left from Grand Blanc and drove over to Harrisburg for a total of 544 miles. It took us 8 hours and 24 minutes. All of this information that I'm going to show you guys is based on driving whatever the speed limit was on the particular road that we were on. So if it was 65, we drove 65. If it was 70, we drove 70. And of course, in parts of Texas, we were actually up into 75 mile an hour speed rating. The rating on the tires for this particular trailer is 75 miles an hour. So even if the rating would have went up to 80, we would have still had to have stayed below at 75 or below. So I'm going to show you total stops also for every one of the days that we were driving. So we, along with the fuel economy and DEF economy. So for this particular first day, we had a total of 3 stops. We did 2 diesel fill-ups and we did 1 DEF fill-up. The diesel mile per gallon rating was 14.49 for that day. And the DEF mileage was 366 miles per gallon. So that is significantly lower than what you get when you're not towing, but it turns out this was actually one of the better days. So now let's move on to day 2. Day 2 took us from Harrisburg down to Jackson, Tennessee, where we stayed the night. So this was a total of 847 miles, and it was 12 hours and 47 minutes with our stops. We had a total of 3 stops. We did 3 diesel fill-ups, and we actually had to fill up 1 time for DEF. The fuel economy for this particular leg was 13.14 miles per gallon, and our DEF reached an actual low of 239 miles per gallon. The DEF tank inside of the Duramax is either 5.2 or 5.4 gallons, but with the way that the entire emission systems work, you can actually only use somewhere around 4.5 to 4.8 gallons before it's going to actually start limiting some of your speed. So in saying that, you have approximately 1,150 miles available in between DEF fill-ups before you start getting a bunch of major warning issues coming from the truck. Day 3 took us from Jackson, Tennessee down into Austin, Texas. It was a total of 747 miles, and it took us 11 hours and 26 minutes with our stops. Fuel mileage was actually a little bit better at 13.95 miles per gallon, and DEF remained about the same at 242 miles per gallon. There were a total of 5 stops. We filled up with fuel 3 times, and we ended up doing 1 DEF. So I think the major takeaway for this is if you're planning on using a Silverado 1500 Duramax with a 3-liter diesel engine and doing some long distance towing, you better plan on stopping for DEF almost every single day. Of course, a lot of that depends on the mileage that you're getting and what type of trailer you're actually towing. But if you were doing anything similar to like what I was doing, that's going to be the case. Not to say that it's a bad thing. It wasn't. But it's just something that you need to be aware of if you're going to be doing some heavy work with this particular vehicle. After unloading and doing some running around in Texas, we had to start with our trip back home. The trip was basically the same, almost in reverse, but we left from Austin, Texas, and decided to stop at the same place in Jackson, Tennessee. Mileage shows up a little bit different at 730 miles, probably because of some of the stops that we made, and we were actually able to make it in 10 hours and 30 minutes. Since we only had 4 stops, we stopped 3 times for fuel, and it turns out this day we didn't have to stop at all for DEF. Our diesel average fuel economy was 15.13 for this segment of the trip, but probably was skewed a little bit because of some of the running around without the trailer that we were actually making. And of course, on the return trip, we were running unloaded, which I'll be doing more videos about whether it's speed or weight that actually more affects the fuel economy with towing. So that brings us to day 5 of our round trip, still running unloaded, but we left from Jackson, Tennessee, and ended up going through Cincinnati, Ohio, and then back to Grand Blanc for a total of 707 miles. It took us 10 hours and 35 minutes with our stops. We had a total of 4 stops. We only filled up twice for fuel, and we filled up once with DEF. So our diesel fuel economy was 13.58 miles per gallon, and our DEF fuel economy, or DEF economy, was 326 miles per gallon. Of course, the next morning I did have to finish filling up because we were relatively low when we ended up getting home. So in conclusion, the total trip mileage was 4,129 miles. Of that, 3,600 miles, give or take a few, was actually done towing that particular trailer. Overall, we averaged 14.17 miles per gallon for diesel fuel, and the average was 309.57 miles per gallon of diesel exhaust fluid. On average, your range for DEF will be 1,176 miles. That gets calculated by using the 3.8 gallons, which is approximately when the warning comes on, and multiplying it by the 309.57 miles per gallon. So in reality, you should plan on filling up every day, or potentially every other day, like I had stated earlier. Light-duty diesels like the LM2, the 3-liter straight-six diesel, have to fall in a different classification as far as emissions are concerned. A heavy-duty diesel, a 2500 or a 3500 truck, actually is allowed to emit so much per horsepower that is actually put out by the engine. Light-duty diesel engines are actually limited by so many grams or milligrams of emissions by the mile. So they need to be able to take care of all of their emissions regardless of whether you're actually towing or not towing, making the DEF consumption higher than what you're going to see on a heavier duty diesel vehicle. I'm going to be putting together an additional video discussing this in more detail in the future, but now let's get right down to the nuts and the bolts of the whole thing. How much did it cost to run this trip towing that particular trailer? In August of 2020, the average fuel cost was about $2.66 per gallon, and DEF was about $2.89 per gallon if you buy it from a truck stop, giving us a total of $835.71 for the entire trip, or just over 20.24 cents per mile. Overall, in my opinion, it was a great trip. The truck performed extremely well, and overall efficiency I thought was extremely good for towing the amount of weight and also the speeds that we were towing at. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. I really appreciate it. Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button if you like this. Ask me questions if you have any questions, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Have a great day.